Thank you for tuning in, and we are back for another edition of the Reeves Reflection. I'm your host, Tony Reeves, so let's go ahead and get started. So someone recently asked me the question about what was it like when I started my first full-time job. They were trying to give some guidance to their, to their young kids, because of course, I'm at that age now where a lot of my peers have kids who are coming out of college and getting ready to go into the professional arena. So they asked me, just because their experiences were very different, what was my experience? And mine was somewhat unique. And so in my particular instance, what happened was I had a military commitment that I had to get out of the way first. I was only like 5 months of training. And then I started looking for my first job probably about a year after I'd graduated. And so I got hired, and I was very fortunate. I got hired fairly quickly. I got out of the military in February of the year I turned 20, my 22nd year, and then I started looking for a job, and I got hired working for the state in April of that same year. So literally, once I put my boots on the ground and actually started looking for a job, I actually was able to find one fairly quickly. My experience was a little, probably not uncommon, but for me, I had spent most of my formative adult years, or at least 4 years of college, in Tampa, Florida. So I had pledged there. I went to school at the University of Tampa. I pledged at the University of South Florida. So I had a group of friends on 2 different campuses. Most of the people that I knew, that I had grown up with in terms of going from a late teen to an adult, were in Tampa. But the job that I got was working for the state in Tallahassee, Florida. And so for me, for those of you who are not familiar with the geography for the state of Florida, Tallahassee is about 4 hours away. And I knew no one there. So when it came time for me to move, it was funny because I had just bought a brand new car. And so the only thing that I had was my clothes, my car, and my pots and pans that I got because I had an apartment on campus my senior year. So I didn't have anything. And so from that standpoint, I was starting from scratch. Now, it's funny because recently my wife and I had the opportunity to help another good friend of ours whose daughter is going to graduate school. She was moving to an apartment, so we helped her move and everything like that. And she really was feeling a particular way about feeling like she was inconveniencing us. And all I kept thinking was, when I was her age, because literally I'm pretty much close to the same age as her when I went to graduate school, I had no support in the sense, because I knew I was going to Tallahassee, so I knew I was going to have to get an apartment. I knew about paying rent primarily because I grew up in an apartment, so I knew what rent looked like. I knew about the light bill, phone bill, some of those things from my experiences on campus. So now here I am in this unique situation where my thought is, okay, so what do I need to do? So I drove up. Once I got hired to the job, they gave me like 3 weeks to get up there. So what I ended up doing was, it was wild, because for about a good couple of weeks I was driving back and forth from Tallahassee to Tampa. I went to Tallahassee to interview. They offered me the job and basically wanted me to start 3 or 4 weeks later. So I drove up for the interview, drove back up to Tallahassee to go apartment hunting. And so, I'm driving around, and the fascinating part was I had no concept of what was too much or what was too little. And so my first thought was to try to get a job, get an apartment as close to where I worked as possible. The unfortunate part was most of the apartments in close proximity to where I was working were expensive. And I was able to figure that out fairly quickly, because I was able to figure out from my salary how much I was going to get paid per month. And I needed to be mindful of the fact that back in these days, we didn't have cell phones. So you had to worry about paying for a landline. You had to worry about paying for a cable. You had to worry about paying for utilities and your rent. And I also had to worry about insurance on the car, renter's insurance for my apartment, and be mindful of food and all those things. And this was all new. I had no knowledge of this. And my mom probably could have taught me, but I kind of had to figure out a lot of this on my own. So we have a situation where I go apartment hunting. What ended up happening was I started looking for nice and cheap. That was kind of the mindset I had, because, like I said, back then, and for those of you who are like, well, how much were you making back then? This is 1992, everyone. And I was making $18,000 a year was what the job paid. Most of you are like, what the hell? In today's terms, that's about 36. Okay, so back then it was 18. Today it's about 36, so that you can have a field of reference. So when I got there, the nice thing about most apartment complexes is that just like today, they give you a breakdown to tell you how much you need to have just to kind of get everything going. So of course, they're telling me I need my first month, last month rent. They won't let me move into the apartment until I get the power turned on, and it's like power turned on and like one or two other things that had to be turned on. So I was going to get the power, phone, and cable all turned on and so forth. So mind you, and I did have a small television, so we take that back. So mind you, all I had was basically car, clothes, linen, plates, and a television. That's it. So of course, these are the things I have to have. I have no money at all, nothing. I probably have about $100, $200, but so in order for me to get to this apartment, I had to have the first month, the last month's rent, and then I had to have all the security deposit, first month, last month, and then all these other things. So what I ended up doing was I contacted my mom and I told her. I gave her a blanket of how much money I needed. And I always remember this because it was like, I think I said I needed roughly probably about $1,000 in order to get started. And that's pretty cheap back then and so forth. And so I had a couple $100 for myself, so I was good there. So I was trying to get at least $1,200. So $1,200, so this way when I moved in, I could at least go grocery shopping for food. So I told my mom, so my mom went and talked to my grandparents, and my grandparents ponied up $400. My mom ponied up like $350. And so I asked my dad to help, and my dad ended up it was funny because he was going to send me $200, and then I ended up getting $7,500 from him. So, excuse me, I only got $75. Let me get this straight. Grandparents $400, mom $350, dad $75. And as a result, I ended up going into the apartment not having completely all the money I needed. I had enough in order to get into the apartment. But in terms of food, I think that was the only thing that was hurting, because part of my reliance upon the $200 from my dad was that the $200 from him would take care of the food. My mom, me, and my grandparents took care of all of the things I needed to do to get into the apartment. But everything after the fact, I needed, hopefully, my dad to help me out with. So what ended up happening was, unfortunately, I got a $75 and a lecture about how I needed to be a more grateful child. So you can imagine, here I am, 22 years old, getting ready to start my very first apartment, getting a lecture from someone about how I'm not a grateful child, as I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to move into being an apartment on my own. So at that point, I made the decision that my dad was not going to be a reliable source to assist me. I also made the decision that I didn't want to burden my mother or my grandparents, because they had to basically pony up money to help me get in, which meant, and you're saying, okay, what did that mean? Well, that effectively meant that when I first moved into the apartment, I didn't have anything. God bless today. Like today, if you've got a couple extra $100 and you've got some type of infrastructure to support you, you could go to Facebook Market and get you somebody's used stuff or whatever the case may be. Don't get me wrong. There were opportunities for me to get stuff at that time as well. But the reality is that at that point, I did not know about anything. So the first month or two, everything I did was on the floor. I slept on the floor. I ate on the floor. I had just enough money to be able to get some very, very basic things. So I was able to get eggs, milk, cereal, hamburger helper, some lunch meat, just enough in my mind to hold me out until I got, my first paycheck. And then I learned very quickly that first paycheck wasn't enough, because basically what ended up happening was, once that first paycheck hit and I was able to literally see how my expenses hit, I think because back then I was getting paid per month, not every 2 weeks, but once a month. I was surviving on about $125 a month, something roughly out of that. So $125 a month, that was necessary to fill up my car and get stuff to eat. And so as you can imagine, I did all kind of weird things to get by. So I had one of my coworkers actually gave me a table that they didn't want anymore. They lent me a mattress so I could have something to sleep on. I had a Sears credit card and a Citibank Visa card, which I should not have used, but I used the Sears credit card in order to get a couch that I actually pulled out into a bed, because my philosophy was if it ever got crucial and the person wanted that bed back they gave to me, I could always pull out the bed on the couch, or I could sleep on the couch. And my mother was a big fan of Finger Hut, which I quickly became a fan and then stopped being a fan because Finger Hut was just crazy and so forth back then. And so I was able to get a stereo with Finger Hut, and I think that was about it. But during those first few months, I was on my own. So like when I talk to my colleagues or my friends who talk about what advice they should give their kids, I tell them all the time, just be supportive of them in terms of helping them not have to think about all the things that maybe you had to think about when you were on your own if you didn't have support. Like some of my friends had support from their parents, so they did a lot for their kids, what their parents did for them, and then some. And I stressed it. I said I was in a much different position because my mom's a single parent. She's working as a teacher. Her funds are unique for her, and I am out on my own, and I am trying to figure out ways to make things happen on my own. In retrospect, I probably shouldn't have used the Sears card. And if I did, I should have used it to get more practical things like, I don't know, either a living room set or a dining room set or even a bedroom set. I didn't get a bed, my own bed, till almost about 6 or 8 months later when somebody gave me their water bed. Same thing. The couch that I got, somebody asked me the other day, whatever happened to that couch? Because I had friends of mine who remembered the couch because I was known for this huge sectional that was so big that it dominated the room. My mom ended up giving it away to some young lady who was a single parent in need. Same thing, almost all the stuff that I had, of course, you're going to outgrow it at some particular point. But the point I was effectively making is that if your kids are in a position where they have you, and I know sometimes people are like, oh, I want my kids to suffer. I'm like, listen, there's a difference between letting your child go through challenges in order to be well-rounded. I'm not knocking that. But you also know your child. If you've got a child that has never asked you for anything, has never imparted upon you that you've got to get them something, and you're in a position to be able to support them unlike what you got, go for it. I don't see where the problem is and so forth. As long as you know they're demonstrating an appreciation. That's different from maybe having a child that's so spoiled they're used to you giving them everything and then don't know how to act when you don't give them something. In my particular case, I didn't have a whole lot of support in terms of I felt that I needed to do so much by myself, and that my mom and the people who were supporting me, I was so worried about being a burden that I didn't ask for any help. And that was probably to my benefit, but also to my detriment, mainly because I made a lot of financial decisions because I believed that I had to do it by myself. So I ended up running my Sears credit card up. I ran my Citibank Visa card up. I had a Texaco gas card that not only did I use to put gas in the car, because guess what? I had to pay for gas because where I lived in my apartment was so far away from my job, I had to drive back and forth. Guess what? That got ran up. In the end, I ended up paying them off and getting them out of here. But think about this. Imagine if I would have just opened my mouth and asked for help, or opened my mouth and told people about how much I was stressing at that particular point in time. During those first several months, I stressed a lot financially and just personally because I was trying to I was trying to be an adult. And being an adult in my mind meant doing this on my own with no help from anyone else. And by doing so, I did develop a keen sense of independence and a keen sense of self-reliance. But I also developed a very bad practice of doing certain financial decisions that followed me for years based on this assumption that if I can't get myself out of it, then I shouldn't expect anybody else to help me. So I say this to the countless number of parents out there who have kids who are getting to that magical point where they're getting ready to transition. If you have a child who you have trained to be self-reliant and be independent, I applaud you. But if you have the resources to be able to help them in ways that maybe your parents couldn't help you, please do so. Because I have told friends, who've said to me, man, Reeves, you was working like you a madman running a thing. I said, yeah, but I did a lot of dumb things because I believed I had to. When in retrospect, if I would have had a little bit more support or trusted people to support me a little bit more, I might have made some different decisions. And there may have been a slightly different mindset about how I view things going forward. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Reeves Reflection. As always, I enjoy your checking me out. You can always check me out on anthonyreeves.com, or you can visit me on any of your listening platforms. Again, thank you. And as always, I ask my favorite question of the day. Are you ready for the Anthony Reeves experience?